So our first speaker today is Dr. Jeremy Pearce. He leads the market intelligence team and has been with ITA for over 30 years after a PhD in tin chemistry. He's responsible for forecasting tin supply and demand, researching market trends in existing tin uses and emerging uses as well. Jeremy will provide an update on the tin market and the case for tin investment going forward. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Freddie, and thank you everyone for joining. So Freddie has given me the task of giving you an overview of where we are in the tin market, and particularly looking ahead for tomorrow. And as most of you in the room will realize, this has got a much more complicated story literally by the day. So it's quite a challenge that I have to talk to you today. I'm going to see what we can do. Generally speaking, we're looking forward to tin for tomorrow. This is our future-focused message that we want to be clear about, because there are many things that we together as an industry need to consider and the world together needs to consider around tin. So briefly, I'm going to look at where we are, and I think it's becoming more important, as I've just said, to consider where we are at the moment, and that's why I'm going to spend more time there, and then we're going to think about where we're going, and the question that we're all here to discuss is how will we actually get there? So that's the basic theme of the presentation. It starts basically with the message that we all very familiar with in this room, I hope, that tin is already an essential metal. This graph is showing clearly that half of tin use is in solders, as you can see in the top right there. I didn't bring my circuit board with me today, but many of you know very well that tin is the glue that holds together all electronics around us and a lot of the electrical equipment as well. But tin is also used in chemicals, in plastics, in glass, in tin cans, in bearings. Just about everything in your world is actually held together by the invisible element, the spice element, tin, as you all well know. So that's a very important message straight away. Tin is already essential to our world. But it's going to become more so, and it's already becoming so. This is because of the two major drivers that we have on this slide: climate change, which is, as we all know, becoming an emergency, and digitalization on the right-hand side, which we're learning more about by the day. So on the left-hand side, we see particularly tin is being used in solar ribbon on the bottom left there. It's the silver strip you see across all solar panels. It's a copper ribbon coated with tin solder. That is holding together all of the solar panels today and in the future. And that's already making a significant difference today to the tin demand. In the middle, electric vehicles, not going to leave the garage without tin, as one analyst quoted. There's much more tin in an electric vehicle than there is in a conventional vehicle, and that's already starting to make a difference today. On the right-hand side, digitalization, we're already seeing some of that with AI just been released in the last year to give you some impression of what's coming. That's pushing now into the medium term with 5G, but there's a huge amount of new electronics that are coming. And all of that, every single byte of data will have to go through thousands of solder joints, little pieces of tin, and that's going to be vital and, for the future. So it's already essential, and it's going to be a strategic metal for our future. But it's complicated, and it's a bumpy ride. So if we ask ourselves the question, well, where is this technology surge? Well, you can look at the demand curve here briefly. You can see that in the early part of the graph there, lead-free solder, China growth was very significant. We had a financial crash in 2008, 2009. Then we do start to see this surge. So the average growth rate of tin is about 2%, and we were seeing close to 3 or 4% during that period. But as you can see here, at the top of that curve there, suddenly we had the impact of a lot of different macroeconomics. Donald Trump came into power, and that started a trade war, which began the process, and then we had a pandemic, and now we've got, just after a brief recovery, a significant economic impact with inflation. So it's a very bumpy ride, actually. And this series of macro shocks has given us 5 years so far of instability. With that, growth has been massively disrupted, especially the consumer, and that's why it's got very complicated. So there's been a very low demand this year, and we'll come to that, despite this technology surge, which is underlying that, and that's an important dynamic. And because of this, we are seeing this record price volatility, very turbulent fundamentals. And because of that, we're also seeing speculators coming to the market, and that's also confusing the picture very much as they're speculating on these trends. So it's a bumpy ride, essentially, and that's why we need to pay attention. But it's not just the demand that's in trouble. The supply dynamics here have been massively disrupted this year, and here is a list of fairly well-known issues that have happened across the world, which have brought supply right down from recovering from the pandemic into a new low this year. And that's important, and it's important because these are the reasons behind some of these are new. These are new supply dynamics which are disrupting supply, and we need to pay attention to that. And just trying to give you the big picture here. So essentially, as you can see, if we step out and look back, we can see there on this graph on the right-hand side, the dark blue is the demand, the light blue is the supply. Generally speaking, demand and supply have kept in sync, as you might expect, over the period. But I'm trying to make a point here that actually, if you look in the big picture, it's much more complicated. So the existing supply overall over this decade has not really been expanding very much, and there's been a long-term decline in stocks. So generally speaking, the liquidity is less than it was, and the market has become moving into a deficit period. And this year particularly is extremely complex because of what I've said, is that the reasons for the supply and demand decreases are decoupled. At the moment, there's a whole queue of people asking us for supply and demand balances, and although we've got the best data in the world, it's still a struggle because the dynamics are very extreme. This year could have been 20,000 tons either way, actually, and that's an important point and something to pay attention to. And not only that, but it's got much more complicated in terms of geography. As we know, our world is breaking up, supply chains are moving around, and geography matters. And that has meant it's all a multipolar supply and demand situation, which makes it very much difficult. So market analysts are on double pay at the moment, trying to work out what's happening. The good news is that there are green shoots for demand. We feel that there has been a turnaround after July. The electronic side is sounding a bit more positive. We can see, although the LME stocks are still high, there's more trade on the LME in terms of cancel warrants at least. The stocks in China are starting to come off, and there is movement. What we're paying attention to in the right-hand side there is the technology boost that we expect, and which is already underpinning a lot of demand. So you see there in red is the electric vehicles, in blue is the solar PV, and this is quite a big numbers already for tin. Remember, tin is only 380,000 altogether, so it's already quite big numbers, and this is just the beginning, essentially. So although supply is very low, so although demand is very low, this demand spike is already here, mostly in China, which is why it's complicated. But the question we're standing now is, if then we're in this low trough of demand low and supply low, if we see this demand recovery, the question is, can supply respond to that? And if you look across the board and go back to the question of why do we see these disruptions, we're looking at these new factors coming in. So resource nationalization across the world in different each of the major supply regions has seen different versions of this, but we're seeing increasingly political, increasing government intervention in the supply side. We've seen equity protests in South America, an export ban talked about in Indonesia. We're seeing relicensing in Myanmar, and in China and US we're seeing questions about mining policy. So the government is getting involved, and this is making it a very different situation than we've had before. Every major producing region has been affected, as we well know, and so we need to pay attention to that. Looking forward then, price will be a factor in this question of the supply response. There's something from ASM that will give us some flexibility, but the focus will come onto stocks. The liquidity dependence on stocks is going to be very important. And overall, we need to keep our eye on China. China is going to lead this, and there's a risk here, especially with that technology push so hard in China, that the supply chain outside China will be strained because of that. But that's the best answer we can give to that question, but it's going to be interesting. So that's giving you a brief overview of where we are, so that we can get a better handle on where we might be going in terms of the future. is not just then these three areas that I highlighted in solder that we're talking about. There's a whole bunch of other technologies that are coming down the line. This is all in R&D, and some of this is going to start emerging in the next 5-10 years. ITA is working hard now. We're going to boost our work on technology in the next year, and we'll provide a showcase in the early part of next year of some of these technologies. So we're talking about tin in lithium-ion batteries, tin in sodium-ion batteries, tin in solar cells, tin in hydrogen production, tin in thermoelectrics, tin in carbon capture, a whole bunch of them. And we'll be highlighting these and working around these, building new technology spaces around these in the next year to highlight this. So this is coming probably in the closer to 2030 timescale, but that's also coming down the pipe. And that will also then power growth based on the point made there. Tin has some very unique technology properties. So this is a slide that everyone is looking for in terms of our best understanding of where we are in terms of this. In summary, this is always a work in progress, but it's clear that whatever numbers we put on this, however we cut the cake, there will have to be a wake up to tin. As you can see there, there will be the curve from demand in blue and the supply curve in red are not going to meet at some point in the future on this particular iteration in a relatively short term. And so this is the point that I think this event is about, and the conversation that we need to have as an industry and that the world needs to have in terms of meeting its objectives for climate change and for digitalization. On the right-hand side is our latest forecast for technologies in the baseline there, which is in light blue, the 5G, the EV, and the solar in black, to give some idea of where we think that by 2030 we're going to need, and that is a lot more tin, and that's the main point that we need to look for. But there are also a lot of challenges ahead. So we already talked about supply chain shifts, we already talked about increased geopolitical risk, logistics, carbon footprint. All this is coming down the pipe, and we have a much more regionalization. We've got strategic minerals policies, and ITA is going to be paying attention to that in the next year as well. We've also, as are going to be presented today, got an expanding ESG focus, and this is already causing supply disruptions in the world and will do so much more as we go forward into the future, and they're going to cause a lot more constraints on the tin supply situation. And as a result, there'll be increased costs, increased competition for the industry. So we're here to talk about investment at the moment, and if these scenarios pan out, then the question is, will there be need to be some rethink on investment strategy? Will governments need to have to intervene to secure that supply? That's an open question, but it's one that's on the table for sure. There are also some other strategic issues, like where is the smelting capacity, and where are these resources that we are going to need? And ITA is going to pay much more attention to that in the next year. We are very focused on that, and we will provide some support on those issues in the next year. But those are the challenges that are ahead. So how will we get there? Well, this is something that we're here to talk about primarily. The main message that we want to give, and it's important to give, is there's plenty of tin in the world. That these are the resources that are 50 years plus in the ground. So that's very clear and needs to be clear. There's a large underlying resource base. It's not the question. The question is how much investment, how can it be got out of the ground, and more particularly these days, where? If we look at the major global producers here that are existing at the moment, you can see that in general the curve is not positive. You can look at the Indonesian red there and see that there is a significant decline in Indonesian production so far this year, and that's a major underpinning support for tin supply. All the major regions are sliding, Indonesia especially. But there is some promise, and we're seeing some of this in Africa, for example. Alphamin has some expansion next year. We're seeing some new capacity going into Africa. That's promising. We're also hearing that Bolivia is promising. There are some prospects there for sure. Output is up in Bolivia. And interestingly, the Myanmar situation may well turn around. If there's a good investment into Myanmar, then with more technology, they can get deeper underground. The grades they'll find the higher grades. It's possible that Myanmar will turn around. So that's interesting. So there are some promises there on the existing supply, but the questions are still there. there will be more recycling, and this is again another area that ITA will pay attention to in terms of recycling next year. There are plenty of existing secondary sources, but e-waste is the big opportunity. Getting tin out of waste electronics is the big opportunity, and that already is coming out of the copper circuit. So we're already seeing several plants being built now which are taking tin out of anode slimes in a copper circuit. That's interesting, and I think that's important. So we'll see modest growth at the moment because there are increased market incentives, as we all know, but there are some constraints on that, particularly technology. Again, this is what we're here to talk about today. So ITA is working hard to compile this list and working hard with all of you to look at this list of explorers and developers. There is a project pipeline. There's about 100 projects in the list, but there's mixed viability. And you can see here that in terms of explorers, there are many that are suspended. There are many that are in early exploration. But if we look at developers, there are about 35 in the list at the moment, but some of those are suspended and others operating. So this is a brief summary of the list, and as I said, in the next year, we'll be also working hard to clarify and to put that forward as to what that pipeline actually contains. We're starting to plot these sort of resource maps, and you'll see more of that again, of where are these new investment opportunities around the world. And some of those are here today, thankfully, and we'll be presenting to you. So that's important, and that's what we're here today to talk about. So overall, is it enough? That's the question that we're asking. It's clear, however, that urgent investment is needed. Government carbon targets cannot be achieved without tin. Digitalization, our aspirations on AI need to be glued together with tin. And so because tin is a relatively small market, it should be a relatively small investment that's required, but where is it going to come from? But the strategic risks, as we've been saying, are increasing. The macro shocks are holding back this demand. The supply base definitely needs a resilience assessment, and the complex dynamics are really making it hard to look forward into the future. But in summary, our main message, and we will keep saying this, it's time to wake up to tin. Thank you.